You're watching The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with the International Herald Tribune. Here with us in this week's edition is Eleanor Beardsley of National Public Radio and Elisabeth Moutet of the Sunday Telegraph, Craig Kapitis of Bloomberg News, and freelance reporter Celestine Bolen. Now, we mentioned in part one the situation in Libya, and the day before that Libya summit, the French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, as he does every year, addressed French ambassadors in town for their annual, I guess you could call it their back-to-school seminar. And he issued that was actually quite a startling mea culpa when it comes to the whole Arab Spring. A mea culpa over the past coziness that France delved in when it came to certain unsavory leaders.
For years, our diplomacy, and I had my part in it, has been organized around the search for stability. And with this word at heart, we have had links with regimes which could not serve as examples of democracy. The Arab awakening, the people's aspiration for freedom, has made us break away from this contradiction between the values that we're trying to defend and the reality we should have acknowledged.
Eleanor Beardsley, that sort of steals the thunder of all those that are ready to roll out those images of President Assad here in Paris for Bastille Day, Colonel Gaddafi pitching his tent just a couple of years ago here in Paris. What did you make of that statement?
I mean, I think it's great that he said that. I mean, it's true. I mean, I've just done a whole story on that. France's new Arab policy. France is now supporting democracy in the Arab street and the Arab peoples. And it is weird to hear Sarkozy say, well, he did his mea culpa, fantastic. And the other day he said France is with the Arab street. And you're thinking, but France just offered riot control gear to Ben Ali in January. You know, well, if they had this, 180 degrees change in 5 months, good, it's great. And
yeah, of course, the question on everyone's lips on all this is after Libya, next stop Damascus. Maybe not. However, Spain's prime minister, I'll read to you what he said, Elisabeth Moutet, said that the Libyan example should extend to other countries like Syria, where people are fighting for freedom. His remarks coming after the EU's Friday decision to ban imports of Syrian oil. How far do you see the EU and the United States going at this point?
Well, I mean, I don't usually welcome diplomatic initiatives by the EU, which are usually toothless. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I think I'd like to go back on the Sarkozy declaration because he did something that French politicians do not do. He apologized. And that is absolutely not a French thing. It's like ancient Rome. You do not apologize because it's an admission of weakness, and people go like this. And I find it absolutely fascinating that he said, I take my part in this, and we were wrong. That's very impressive. That is, he is in campaign mood. Whatever Nicolas Sarkozy does between now and the end of April to 2012 is all with one aim in sight, and that's to get re-elected president. And he is basically doing something that no French politician, especially no French president, has done until now. I think he's very correctly gauged the mood in the country and abroad, and it's going to be interesting to watch.
All right, so Sarkozy definitely rolling with the punches. In Syria, though, the images are startling, and they just keep coming. We can show you that the latest images that we got from Thursday evening from the city of Homs. The chant there from the protesters is Bashar, don't try to defy us. 2,000 killed since March in Syria. And yet, Craig Kapitis, they're still out in the streets.
Bless their hearts. Where's the West? I still believe this thing is going to be settled. And I said this when this started on this show, and I still believe it. It's going to be settled with Turkish intervention at some point.
So that EU ban on oil imports?
Syria doesn't make anything. No one wants Syria. Syria is an afterthought in the global world of economics, commerce, production. The only thing that Syria kind of has there are all of these Kurds who the Turks don't want coming north. That's the only thing that is going to instigate the kind of, military action that will really be required to overthrow Assad and his thugs. And I think that's going to happen because as I've been on vacation, but in the snippets of news that I've read, there are more and more Kurds going across the border, angering the Turks more and more. And the best way to anger a Turk, and as a Greek I can tell you this, is send in another Kurd. That is going to do it. They don't like that threat. And you look at Turkey right now, it's in one of the strongest positions globally. The new government, it's Erdogan, he's consolidated power. Their economy is booming. They're all across the street from my office for the past 2 days. It's Turkish Delight City down there on Rue Scribe. They are the flavor du jour in the global community. And at some point, they're going to do something. When that is, I can't tell you.
But do you agree, Celestine Bohlen, that there's nothing that the West and the...
I think, the problem is if they could do something, what would they do that would be effective? I mean, that's the big question. The fact is that the opposition is not unified. There's a big split between the people who are in the exile community and people on the street. There's, the religious, there's the Alawite Christian mix. All of this is very combustible. There's huge concern on the part of Israel, big U.S. ally, obviously, and huge concern in Iran, so that the sort of geopolitics are extremely complicated. Turkey sort of looks like it has a kind of a freer hand on one level, but it's also a player in this region with relations with these other groups, other countries as well. So, I think that what everybody hopes for is there can be something more negotiated than what we saw in Libya, that somehow there can be a transfer of power that doesn't go down to that kind of a wire. It's amazing to me that no pressure seems to have any effect on Assad. Basically, that's what we're coming to the conclusion. Will the Russians and the Iranians, for instance, now seeing what happened in Libya, step up their game? That's an interesting question. I don't know.
And yet the people are still out there.
They are.
We're going to move on because still a lot to talk about, and we're going to talk about the fact that before his big return to France, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, free after attempted rape charges, paid a call on his former workplace last Monday, the former boss of the IMF, getting a warm welcome from former colleagues at the International Monetary Fund. However, it's fair to say that this was the week his successor stepped out of the shadows. France's former finance minister creating a media storm with her speech to a conference of central bankers last weekend, where Christine Lagarde said the following, that European banks need urgent capitalization. They must be strong enough to withstand the risks of sovereigns and weak growths. And Europeans are furious. And Elisabeth Moutet, the Eurozone leaders are furious. People at the European Central Bank are furious. The boss of Deutsche Bank saying, I think nothing at all of that statement.
Oh, they are. They are spitting and they're foaming at the mouth. And they're saying extremely unkind things about Madame Lagarde, saying that she is a lawyer and not an economist by trade, that she was chosen by the IMF because she's a very good diplomat and she can negotiate with the countries visited by the IMF and having the IMF sanctions, so to speak, visited on them. But that she doesn't understand. And she was basically, I heard somebody, I will not name the French bank, but it's a French bank that has been recently attacked, and they say she's been completely taken over by the American-born economists who operate at the IMF, and they sold her this, and she bought it hook, line, and sinker. And she'd better sort of get out of this and realize that she needs some independence. So there's a feeling in Europe, and especially in France, that there's an attack, a concerted attack against the euro. There's a concerted attack against some French banks and a German bank, and there's a general feeling saying that the Eurozone doesn't have half the problems that that Britain and America have, but that speculators have targeted the Euro and the European institutions.
Of course, it gets better.
I'm not saying it's true or false. I'm saying that's the feeling.
It gets better or worse, if you will. The Financial Times Thursday revealing the fury of Eurozone officials at a preliminary IMF report that warns that banks on the continent may have to write off the equivalent of more than 10% of their cash reserves as government bonds turn to junk. Celestine Bolen, where there's smoke, there's fire in this?
I mean, I think, part of it's difficult to sort of really speak about this with an opinion unless you really know some of these very technical questions. From what I've been able to gather, the fact of the matter is that the stress tests of the banks last July didn't take into account sovereign debt, which seems to be a rather sort of large, again, I'm not an expert, but it just strikes me as, and that's the problem. So people are worried about that. Next, that the idea of the Euro fund is simply not big enough to handle the kind of fragility that this could suggest. And, that somebody needs to sort of wake up and come to the rescue of a situation that could get, sort of dangerously fragile.
I noticed a chuckle on the part of Craig Kapitas there.
Look, bankers suffer from their own unique form of Alzheimer's disease. They can't even remember what happened last week, let alone 2 years ago. The global economy is in dire, dire straits. And as Celestine correctly points out here, there are so many factors and figures involved in this, and you can spin it many ways depending on the figure. How bad, people say, how bad is it? And I think Lagarde said it right, but still, she's not saying how bad is it. How do we codify how bad it is? Okay, I'll take a shot. 50% of the tax that the citizens of France paid this year is going to service France's creditors.
And that's France. That's not the Southern European nations.
One of the problems with economies is try to think micro, not macro. Let's just look in France, where we all live. Now you think about that. This is a sovereign nation, a very powerful nation. 50% of its tax revenue is going to service its creditors. I think that's a statistic that comes with some juice and with some jazz and tells you how bad it is. How long can France, or if you look at this at any country, can they go along paying this amount of money to service creditors while at the same time maintaining the services of the state which people have come to require and depend on?
All right, we're going to quickly move on because the clock is running out here. And before we go, France may have an answer, by the way, to the UK phone hacking scandal. However, it's more of a top-down affair, if you will. Two journalists for Evening Daily Le Monde did indeed have their phones tapped while researching the L'Oréal Cash for Campaign scandal. The cosmetic heiress Liliane Bettencourt reportedly giving out lots of cold hard cash to the campaign to elect Nicolas Sarkozy in 2007. The DCRI, that's France's answer to MI5, working to unearth the journalist's sources, journalists whose homes were burgled.
Fabrice Lhomme and I were very exposed to pressure from the offices of the French president over the Bettencourt case. My apartment was burgled as well as Fabrice's. My phones were tapped several times. So we thought that if the authorities were prepared to do such things, then it seems likely that they indeed used more or less draconian methods.
Now, one of the paper's sources, an advisor to the justice minister, suddenly found himself transferred to an assignment in French Guyana. Le Monde, on its front page editorial Thursday evening, the very top echelons of power used public funds for private means and to protect the party of the president. They did not hesitate to divert police services from their true mission, which is to protect citizens. I'm going to ask you a question here, Craig Kapitas. Wasn't there a case like this in America called Watergate where
the difference was that Woodward and Bernstein and the good folks of the Washington Post were not on the government payroll. Yeah. Look, you lie down with dogs, you get fleas. Anyone who's interested in this, I just would refer them to The Hidden Face of Le Monde, this wonderful book written a number of years ago by Pierre Pien.
These journalists, it's now been shown, they had their phones tapped and their apartments burgled.
Okay, but Le Monde, there's the Le Monde and the French written press for years, and this is well documented, particularly in this book, has been in bed with the French government. They take gifts, they take financials from them, they go on holidays. In instances, and you can see this in The Hidden Face of Le Monde if you want to read this book by the best investigative journalist in France, Pierre Pien. They oftentimes give their stories, their interviews, to be edited by them. So there has been.
I don't know that story.
Well, read the book. Yeah. You know, you could look it up.
I think. I mean, you know, I like it when Craig really gets going because it's always more fun. But I'm going to get going on the other side.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I just don't think that there's any excuse. You don't tap phones of journalists to find sources. That's why you have press laws to protect you. Stop it. Sorry.
The government thinks Le Monde works for them.
That they're using as an excuse the outrage that they feel that the journalists were divulging information from the courts, which is protected information by law. Also, it must be said, yes. But I mean, the fact is that press laws are there to protect the freedom of people to report things that they think are untoward in business and government. And either this government understands that or it doesn't. And I'm saying, I think that the sad case about this is that they don't understand.
This is the dark side of Nicolas Sarkozy. I mean, you watch him on Libya, you watch him apologize to the world for France in the Arab, befriending, long friends of Arab dictators. And he's so fabulous on some things, but then personally, if it's rumors about his married life with Carla Bruni or things like this, you just say, "Wow,
but
this
you
is."
think he invented this? I mean, François Mitterrand commissioned 5,000 wiretaps.
He got caught. That's the problem.
It took time to catch him.
And once it gets caught, it's sort of a DSK with the pants on. I mean, in a way, it's a different.
It is reprehensible, but when you lie down with dogs, you get fleas, and
that's not.
You get bugs.
Oh, you get bugs. Yeah, you get bugged in this instance.
And Elisabeth Moutet mentioned it is an election year, so perhaps it's a story that won't go away either. We'll be following it. I want to thank you very much, Celestine Bohlen and Elisabeth Moutet, Craig Capidis, and Eleanor Beardsley. Thank you for being with us for The World This Week.